welcome back to my channel, Book Talks with Yo. My name is Yoanna and today I'm sharing with you some of my tips for writing great dialogues. One of the things that makes a novel intriguing and helps bring the characters to life is a strong, intriguing and well-written dialogue. Personally, I really enjoy writing dialogue. This probably is my favorite part of writing, and I really pay very close attention to it, especially when I'm editing my novel, because I believe this can be another deal maker or deal breaker for the reader. But I've talked with some fellow writers, and I've come to realize that actually many people dread writing dialogues. So today I'm sharing with you some of my top tips for writing strong dialogues. So grab a pen and notebook and let's create some good stuff. One of the key things when it comes to writing good dialogue is knowing your characters well, as you need to give them a unique voice. You probably can guess where I'm going with this because I've been mentioning this a lot in my advice videos, probably in most of them, but this is because I strongly believe that this thing can be a game changer for any writer. And here, of course, come the character profile sheets. If you've watched my video about creating strong characters, you probably know that I mentioned how important it is to note down how your characters speak. For example, do they speak in a more elevated or educated manner, or do they curse a lot? Do they use slang? Do they have an accent or any speech impediments? And so on. Do they stutter, for example? And a few things that might influence your character's voice is their background, like where are they coming from, how old are they, what is their educational background, and things like what are their hobbies and interests, because they might make references and use this as metaphors, and so on. There are a few things in your character profile sheets that you need to write down before you start involving your characters in different dialogues, because this will help you make them unique and give them a distinctive voice. Next thing is very close to the first tip, and this is to know how your characters communicate. If you've already figured out how they sound, how they speak, and what is their unique voice, now it is time to pay some close attention to the precise way they express themselves. For example, you want to know how they process thoughts and emotions. Do they react impulsively, or do they think first? They think before speaking. How do they express their emotions? Are they open to talk about them, or are they more shy and introverted and prefer to avoid this topic using short sentences? Are they an eloquent speaker or a more rigid one? Do they use lengthy, wordy sentences, or do they just jump straight to the point? And so on and so forth. You also want to know how do they interrupt other people when they're speaking, and how do they react to being interrupted by others. Do they need to ask questions when talking, or do they need to be reassured by others, and do they need others to reply to what they're saying, and again, so on and so forth. You will figure this out for your precise story, and you will get the idea of it when you start writing. And the other thing you want to know is, do they gesticulate a lot when they're speaking, and what precisely are they doing? For example, each character may have something particular that they do when they speak. Some may touch their glasses, adjust their glasses, or touch their necklace, or something else. My next tip is one that is very important when it comes to writing good dialogues, and this is to make the dialogue sound natural and authentic. You should ditch perfectionism pretty much when it comes to writing dialogues, because all your characters cannot and should not all be amazing communicators. In real life, people make mistakes, people correct themselves when they're speaking, they use the wrong word, they change their word choice. So it's only natural if your characters do the same. Especially if they're under some strong emotions, they're not going to sit down and speak very eloquently. No, of course they're not going to do this. As well as that, they are not on a language exam, so don't make them use the most correct grammar structures or Allow them to give short responses, not full lengthy sentences. Allow them to make mistakes. Allow them to change their word choice in the middle of the sentence, and so on. People do it all the time in real life, so it is normal for your characters to do it as well. It's normal if you want them to sound realistic. As well as that, they might use a wrong word in a particular sentence, or forget a word and try to explain it in some way, especially if English is not their native language. For example, right now I'm writing a story where I have 10 characters from 8 different countries and only 3 of them have English as a native language. And as much as my mind, like my brain is telling me to use the right words, to use the perfect word for this case, or the right grammar structure, I know that realistically I have to shut this voice down and try to make my characters human. And this is what I'm doing. But be careful, because it's very easy to fall into stereotypes, and this is not something you want to do. Next key thing when it comes to writing good dialogue is fitting it into your story. I know that this sounds very simple and straightforward when you look at it, but believe me, there are many ways you can go wrong with this, and you can ruin a perfectly written dialogue by not weaving it naturally into your story. See now, a thing that can help you with this is using less dialogue tags. Dialogue tags are essentially Amy said, or Jack shouted, or John asked, and etc. Some dialogue tags are necessary, so the reader is not confused what is happening. But too many spoil the flow of the story and just ruin the whole scene. So be very careful how you use them. If you, for example, have 2 or 3 characters in a scene and you've already established who is who at the beginning, you don't really need to tell us every 2 sentences who says what, because we will already have an idea of what is happening. And if you've built strong characters with unique voices, that shouldn't be much of a problem. Another thing that might help you with fitting your dialogue into the story is breaking the dialogue with some action. Maybe the character can interact with some of the objects around him. He may pick up something, he might look at something, especially if he's nervous, or he's thinking, or he's telling a difficult story. This actually reminds me of my next tip, and is to always put the dialogue in some context. You want your readers to know what is going on, because you don't want them to feel lost and confused while reading. So you always want to put your dialogue in some context, so the reader can imagine the situation clearer in their head and can know precisely what and where is going on. This reminds me of the tip I mentioned at the last of the previous one, and it is to break the dialogue with some action. By doing that, you give us a clear sense of where the character is. Is he in a room or outside in the garden or something like this? And who or what is there with him. And as well as that, your character may pause for a while longer while talking and may look at a particular object or at something in the distance and think about something else. This will not only break your dialogue and make the scene overall more interesting, but it will also help you with characterization, as we can learn a lot by observing the way the character speaks, the way he's expressing himself, and the way he's concentrating on other stuff. As well as that, another key thing about putting your dialogue in context is showing us how the characters are communicating with each other. What are the dynamics and relationships between them? What is said and what is held back? What are the people's reactions? How comfortable are they about speaking with each other about stuff? And so on and so forth. This will overall make your scene more dynamic, more engaging, and more interesting to read. Next tip is to play around with the body language, as sometimes the way people act and stand while they're talking says even more than the actual words they're using. You can use this to show us whether a character is lying, or whether they say one thing but mean something else, or are they holding back some truth or something like this. Show us their hidden emotions, because sometimes people are not 100% honest when they're having conversations for various reasons. So it's only natural if your characters do so as well. This will not only help you create good dialogue, but it will also help you build strong, realistic, and multi-layered characters, which is essentially what we want. As well as that, you can play with the tone, as the way something is said sometimes changes the complete meaning, changes the whole meaning of a sentence. And you can also show us how other characters are reacting to this. Do they perceive the message literally, or do they interpret it in some other way? You know, you just have to adapt this to the certain situation that you're writing about. Next is the golden rule of writers, and this is show, don't tell. You're probably sick of hearing this, but it really strongly applies when it comes to writing dialogues. Because if you want to take your dialogue from an okay one to a great one, you need to follow this tip. You need to keep it in mind while you're writing. Because it is one thing to tell me John was nervous, and it is another thing to show us that he is nervous, show us how his leg is bouncing, or how he is restless and walking around touching objects while talking, or how he's cracking his knuckles or something like this. You know, all the body language that comes with being nervous. And again, it is one thing to tell the reader Amy was angry at John, and it is another thing to show us her tight lip or clenched jaw, or the distancing between them, or the furrowed brows, and so on and so on. If you've noticed in my previous tip, I used show a lot because it makes the dialogue a lot better if you show us the emotions instead of simply telling us the emotions. It makes the scene more pleasant for the reader because you're not simply leading them by the nose, you're letting them judge the situation for themselves, and you're letting them pick up the clues on their own, which is obviously what the reader wants to do. But be very careful how you use this advice because you don't want to overdo it. Sometimes some emotions don't need to be over-explained. So yeah, just judge the situation, just the particular scene and the pacing of that scene, and then use the tip. My next tip is to listen to people's conversations in real life. Okay, this actually sounded wrong in so many levels, in a creepy stalker type of way, but I definitely did not mean stalk and eavesdrop on people. What I meant was pay close attention to the conversations you're having with other people. You know, you're participating in those conversations. Because there's a lot you can learn from paying attention to how people react in different situations, what body language they're using, they're displaying, what type of words they're using, how they're expressing themselves, and so on and so forth. If you want to make your dialogues as close to natural and as close to real ones, you have to observe situations in real life in order to do so, because they might serve as guidance when it comes to writing. And I know that you've participated in thousands of conversations with other people in your lifetime, but chances are you probably haven't paid much attention to all the details, so try and do so for a few times and see how this might help you make your dialogues, the dialogues you're writing, as close to real life ones as possible. My next tip is to read your dialogues aloud. I know that you probably don't want to sound crazy, so maybe it's better if you don't do this if you're outside or at a cafe, but if you're at home, definitely go for it, because reading your dialogue and listening to it can help you notice things that you haven't noticed when you were just reading it in your head. For example, when you're reading, you can notice where if some parts are rigid and stiff and hard to write, or some parts sound unnatural and sound like an actual person wouldn't say them. And another tip is to ask someone that you trust to read your dialogue to you, because firstly, listening to it read by someone else is a lot different than you reading it to yourself, and it can help you notice things that you missed the first time when you were reading it yourself. And second of all, by observing the reactions of the other person, you can find out whether they are confused at some point, whether they don't know which character is who or which character is saying what, or if they just struggle to read some parts, if they are too long or unnatural. And yeah, by observing their reactions, by listening to them, you can learn a lot about how natural and how easy to read your dialogue is. And finally, here are some questions to ask yourself to check whether the dialogue you've just written is a good one or you should work more on it. The first question is Does this dialogue serve a particular purpose? And what is this purpose? Does it provide us information, or moves the story forward, or helps with the pacing? You don't want to have unnecessary conversation and dialogue in your story because this just won't be interesting for your readers. The second question you want to ask yourself is, do all characters have a distinctive and unique voice, and are you consistently using it? The third question is the word choice correct for the time, the situation, and the character? Is it appropriate for them? The fourth question you want to ask yourself is, have you used the dialogue tags properly? Are there any redundant and unnecessary ones, or are they all correct? And the fifth and last question you want to ask yourself is, have you used enough body language and action to break up the dialogue? By answering all of those questions, you can easily spot the places you need to work more on, and you can even make it as a checklist when you're writing dialogues to make sure you've got all points covered. So yeah, that pretty much wraps up today's video. I really hope you enjoyed watching, and if you did, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on my new videos. Please let me know down in the comments if you've used any of those tips or if you have others that work for you. Thank you once more for watching, and I really hope to see you all next time. Until then, have a smiley week. Bye!